Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, music lovers and audiophiles. Today, I'll be reviewing Focal's flagship headphone, the Utopia. I hope you enjoy it. Focal, as you may know, is a large and technically savvy French manufacturer of speakers, headphones, and raw drivers for other speaker manufacturers. Their technical expertise has been honed on a vast array of products, and their capability in driver design allows them to do science that only a few other manufacturers can do. All right, let's get into a product description of the Focal Utopia. The Utopia is Focal's top headphone model. It was updated in 2022, so this review covers the newer version with its new voice coil alloy and the new acoustic grills. You can see them here. Externally they look quite similar, but inside the grill shaping has been modified somewhat, and of course the voice coils are completely internal. The Utopia is priced, as befits a flagship headphone, at $4,999 in the US. I know that some people's heads split open at prices like that, so if you're in that camp, you can switch to another video now, and sorry about your head. On the other hand, I and many of our viewers love music, and the idea of spending such a sum on years of musical enjoyment seems perfectly rational. At least if the performance is there. Let's see. For the Utopia, Focal has invested in their M-shaped drivers using a beryllium material. They also have, as I mentioned, a special grill shaping for better high-frequency linearity, along with perforated lambskin and memory foam for the ear pads. The drivers are in an open-back chamber to avoid distortions from internal reflections. Now, the Utopia is a wired headphone, because you can't deliver high resolution or even CD quality signals with Bluetooth, not even close. I used mainly high resolution recordings streamed via Qobuz for my testing. A wired headphone requires an amplifier, so, among others, I used the Name Unity Atom, which is a streaming headphone amp, and actually, that worked especially well. But I also used my Lumen T3 streamer driving the DCS Lena, the PassLabs HPA1, the T+A HA200, and the topping A70 Pro. The Utopia is sensitive enough at 104 dB for 1 milliwatt input to work with all of these amplifiers into its 80 ohm impedance. I do not, however, test headphones to see how much blood they can produce in my ear canals. I tend to listen at 78 to 80 dB on average, with some variation for musical types. So your mileage may vary. Like other Focal headphones I've tested, the finish of the Utopias is excellent. They're on the heavy side at 490 grams or about 1 pound. I thought the headband, which you can see here, very soft padding, worked well to distribute the weight. But the ear pad pressure is low, which aids comfort, but means that the Utopias may slide a bit if you bend over to grab a sheet of paper from a desk drawer or to pet your dog or something like that. The bigger thing is probably that the combination of light pressure, an open back design, and no active noise cancellation means these are headphones for your home office, not for the brew pub or an airplane. Ideally, at least. I'll be back in a minute to talk about sound quality. Just a brief interruption, esteemed viewers. I'm Tom Martin, Chief Content Officer of the Absolute Sound. I'd like to invite you to subscribe to the Absolute Sound magazine, which we've been publishing for over 50 years. For $20 per year in print or $10 per year in digital magazine format, you get 11 issues, each with around 100 pages of exclusive equipment reviews, music reviews, and buyer's guides. You also get early access to our 3 awards issues: Editor's Choice, Products of the Year, and Golden Ear. To subscribe Enter this URL in your browser or go to theabsolutesound.com and click on the subscribe button. Thanks, and now back to the show. As you might expect, the Utopias are outstanding headphones. They have a balanced sound from top to bottom, and perhaps more distinctively, in the upper mid-range and treble, they avoid the frequency deviations that saddle many headphone designs, while also delivering a warm and enjoyable bass range and impressively clear mid-range. This combination, is a bigger accomplishment than you may think. Those of you who are into the technology of headphones will know that headphones are not generally designed for flat frequency response at the ear. There are several reasons for this, but a primary one is that normal sounds, like live music, are frequency modified by your torso, your head, and your outer ear. This is called your head-related transfer function, or HRTF. Since headphones don't invoke your torso and face, and only a part of your outer ear, if that, they must be designed to simulate what your HRTF does all the time in the natural world. One way for headphone manufacturers to address this issue is to emulate the so-called Harman curve. The Harman curve specifies a kind of average HRTF effect targeting a broad treble boost in the 2000 to 8000 Hertz range. I want to be clear, in order for headphones to sound balanced from bass through treble, the actual measured response must not be flat from 20 to 20,000 Hertz. What you see here on screen is the frequency response of how a headphone must measure, which is not flat, to sound right, which is flat. There's other frequency shaping involved, but for now I want to say that creating a linear driver that has a complex peak around 4,000 to 5,000 Hertz is, from observation, not easy. Very few headphones track this curve well. From my listening test, the Utopia does a very good job on this tough problem. Treble is clear and balanced, and noticeably lacks the frequency spikes that hamper so many headphones, noting that additive errors are more audible than subtractive errors. For example, on the Shelby Lynne track Breakfast in Bed from the album Just a Little Lovin', the overall instrumental and vocal balance is beautiful and the level of detail is impressive. Now, these are $5,000 headphones, so you might want to be extra picky. I think that's fair enough. With that in mind, I would say that the Utopia sound, like the mid to upper treble, is very slightly diminished compared to the absolute sound. I also sensed a very small upper mid-range dip that leads some female vocals to sound a little more closed down than I think they would sound live. I want to emphasize that these deviations are small, and every headphone I've heard, even at nearly twice the Utopia's price, has some of these. Buying a top headphone is partly an exercise in choosing these deviations to match your music. You hear these small vocal impacts on the Shelby Lynne album that I just mentioned, but not with all female vocalists. And that suggests to me that any deviations from neutral are confined to a small range with the Utopias, which is kind of a nice feature. In addition to a quite accurately balanced treble and mid-range, the Utopia features solid bass. A key feature I find that many listeners want to know about is whether the bass is warm or cold. In this case, the bass balance is slightly on the warm side, which I think many people find reassuring. This overall voicing assessment is part of the way listeners seem to experience the general character of headphones. In this case, I would say the Utopias are in my dynamic transparency camp, with a rather level bass, mid-range, and treble balance, and excellent dynamics. On Lady Gaga's album Joanne, the track Diamond Heart shows off great instrumental delineation, which necessitates a level octave-to-octave balance. This is combined with a danceability that is the hallmark of broad-spectrum dynamics. Very good headphones like the Utopia and, say, the Hi-Fi Man Susvara or the Meze Lyric will still vary from one another. I think that these variations will sometimes be the deciding purchase variable because it controls the broad flavor of the headphone and affects the types of music where each shines. The Utopias sound like they have an audible curve that is very slightly rolled off in the low bass and in the upper treble, although I think this is harmonious with the smooth and all-important mid-range. Note that I'm talking here about the perceived frequency balance, not the measured frequency balance, so ideally this should look very different from the Harman curve we showed earlier, and it does. In contrast, the Hi-Fi Man Susvara's perceived frequency balance is shaped with a slightly recessed mid-range, but more mid-bass and more treble, an effect that is perhaps more impressive, though arguably not as musical. The Meze Lyric, compared to the Utopia, seems flatter in the mid-bass to mid-range region, which means it sounds accurate on a few more tracks, but possibly impressive on fewer if realism isn't your all-encompassing goal. Similarly, in the upper mid-range or lower treble, the Lyric has a small peak, whereas the Utopia and the Susvara seem smoother in this region, but sometimes a bit darker or less open. The overall bass delivery of the Utopia works well on a lot of music that, when coupled with the excellence of the mid-range, the bass deviations from perceived flat won't, I don't think, be an issue for many listeners. To go along with that, I think the Utopia's slight treble sweetness will be judged by many to be a very good choice by the Focal engineering team. My point in all of this is that there's probably not one of these headphones that you can clearly say is better than the other, but that these small differences may well be decisive in your preferences. And as I said before, this has to go along with the kind of music that you primarily listen to, which could be everything or could be some more narrow range of music. Zooming into some of the details, I love the mid-range of the Utopia and think for listeners fond of music concentrated there, for example, singer-songwriters and classical and jazz and classic rock, these will be very satisfying headphones. They might even be unbeatable, though, as always, note that I haven't heard everything. Charles Lloyd's new album, The Sky Will Be There Tomorrow, delivers realistic tonality with a see-through clarity track after track on the Utopias. You can't do this without getting the mid-range and the overall balance pretty close to right. At the same time, I think that slight bump in the upper bass, along with the slow low bass roll-off that almost all open back headphones have, by the way, may not fully satisfy listeners to modern pop, rock, or hip-hop, because these listeners sometimes want to rattle the windows, as it were, in the low end. The Utopias have much less of this low bass roll-off than most open back headphones, so I want to be clear that we're in the world of nitpicking here. And note that Utopias don't come across as bass shy by any means. They sound quite balanced, and this is their great glory. It's just that the bass tone shaping reduces bass definition just a smidge on certain music when you're listening very carefully, and when you're listening to certain music where bass definition is both discernible and important. To illustrate a bass test track, in contrast, that I often use, where the Utopias do a great job, I refer you to Alison Krauss and the track Maybe from her album Forget About It. A bit over 1 minute into the track, there's a solid bass drum whack that the Utopias render with definition, power, and depth. And the Utopias float Alison's beautiful voice above this bass line in a standout way, including the little upper range resonance that is part of her charm. I want to go back to what I called the great glory of these headphones, the overall octave to octave balance, with an example. On Wilco's Yankee Hotel Foxtrot, the track Camera can be rendered as a flat, almost, to me, unlistenable blob, but not on the Utopias. That low distortion, dynamic mid-range, accompanied with well-weighted bass and treble, with the Utopias just gives Jeff Tweedy and company a level of delineation and instrumental resonance that brings the track to life. All right, let's summarize. The Focal Utopia is certainly one of the best headphones currently on the market. You'll have to be the judge of how it fits with your musical preferences because, like all headphones, it has deviations from the absolute sound. Fortunately, unlike many headphones, those deviations are small and I think work well with the psychoacoustics of many listeners and with a large part of the musical catalog. So, in summary, well done. I'll be sad when the Utopias have to go back to Focal. I hope you've enjoyed this review. If you have, please click on the subscribe button. Please hit the notification bell. Check in the description for the URL to get our free weekly newsletter. And as always, we invite you to subscribe to the Absolute Sound magazine. We've been publishing it for over 50 years, and it has some of our flagship material in it, including reviews, product ratings, and news of new technologies. Thanks for watching, and we hope to see you again soon.